Good evening. You're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. The Sultanate of Oman and Germany signs a memorandum of understanding for an integrated supply chain for green hydrogen and ammonia and review latest updates in energy solutions. The Sultanate of Oman expresses its strong condemnation of the armed terrorist attack that took place in the Crocus City Hall near the Russian capital Moscow and resulted in dozens of deaths and injuries. And the UN Security Council votes today on a new draft resolution following the failed US-sponsored ceasefire resolution. Those were the headlines. Now for the news in detail. Hydrom Oman and the German VNG company signed a memorandum of understanding to conduct commercial feasibility study on establishing an integrated Omani-German supply chain for green hydrogen and ammonia and reviewing the viability of concluding a long-term contract to purchase green hydrogen and ammonia from the Sultanate of Oman. This came during the visit of His Excellency Engineer Salim bin Nasser Al-Aufi, Minister of Energy and Minerals, to the German capital Berlin, during which he met with His Excellency Dr. Robert Habeck, German Vice Chancellor and the Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action of the Federal Republic of Germany. The two sides discussed the needs of the energy market in the Federal Republic of Germany and developments in green hydrogen and energy solutions. His Excellency, the Engineer Minister of Energy and Minerals, also participated in the Dialogue on Transformative of Energy Production Sources conference in Berlin, and in his speech at the conference, he stressed the importance of international cooperation in the field of energy transformation, compatibility of energy and green product standards and certificates, and the importance of focusing on local content during the implementation and operation of projects. The Sultanate of Oman expressed its strong condemnation of the armed terrorist attack that took place in the Crocus City Hall near the Russian capital Moscow and resulted in dozens of deaths and injuries. In a statement released by the Foreign Ministry, the Sultanate of Oman expressed its sincere condolences and sympathy to the families of the victims and to the friendly government and people of the Russian Federation, and its wishes for a speedy recovery for the injured. Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed Russians today and declared tomorrow, Sunday, a national day of mourning for the victims of the attack on a concert hall in Moscow. He also said that additional security measures have been imposed throughout the country and suggested that Ukraine was linked to the attack on a concert hall on the outskirts of Moscow that killed 115 people. The Islamic State's group's Afghanistan branch claimed responsibility for yesterday's attack in a statement posted on affiliated channels on social media. However, some Russian politicians pointed the finger at Ukraine shortly after the attack, accusations that Ukraine had strongly denied. Putin said all 4 people directly involved in the attack had been detained and suggested they were trying to cross the border into Ukraine while escaping. He provided no evidence for that claim. On the other hand, a fire broke out in the oil refinery in the Russian Samara region after it was attacked by a Ukrainian drone. Russian sources explained the fire gutted the main oil refining unit of the largest oil-producing company in Russia. Meanwhile, Ukrainian officials said that at least 5 people were killed and dozens were injured as a result of Russian airstrikes using missiles and cruise missiles. 8 missiles hit the Dnipro hydroelectric power station in Zaporizhia, putting the station out of service, which has a production capacity of about 1,600 megawatts. Five Palestinians, including children, were killed and others were injured today in an Israeli raid north of the city of Rafah. The Palestinian news agency reported that occupation aircraft raided a two-story house in the northern part of Rafah, killing 5 people and wounding others. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said that about 100 were killed, including medical personnel who were targeted during sniper shooting operations in the Shifa medical complex. The Israeli occupation carried out an airstrike targeting a residential building west of the Shifa complex, and dozens are still missing under the rubble. Today, the UN Security Council votes on a draft resolution submitted by countries that are not permanent members of the Security Council and calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire during the month of Ramadan. Yesterday, the UN Security Council failed to approve a U.S. draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza within the framework of an agreement on prisoners and detainees after Russia and China vetoed the resolution, which called for an immediate and sustained 6-week ceasefire that would protect civilians and allow the delivery of humanitarian aid. The U.S. Senate approved a government funding bill worth $1.2 trillion to avoid a partial government shutdown. The draft law, which was approved by 74 members while 24 others rejected it, will be referred to U.S. President Joe Biden for approval. The U.S. House of Representatives passed the spending package to finance the U.S. government yesterday, hours before a deadline to avoid an imminent government shutdown. U.S. Senate approves government funding bill worth $1.2 trillion to avoid a partial government shutdown. Oman Humanitarian Rights Commission issued a statement in response to a documentary broadcasted by BBC Africa on Malawian domestic workers who came to work in the Sultanate of Oman and were trafficked, according to the report. The commission affirmed that none of the workers or any international non-governmental organizations contacted or any official authorities responsible for protecting workers' rights in the Sultanate of Oman in order to intervene to resolve any violations suffered by the worker. In the event that such information was established to be true, noting that the Sultanate of Oman has dedicated many channels to submit reports around the clock, and noting also that Omani laws and legislation guarantee workers' rights, such as receiving a monthly wage, providing decent living, and humane treatment that protects the workers' dignity. Last week, Muscat Stock Exchange recorded limited gains in the third week of the annual Ordinary General Assembly meetings of the joint stock companies. The main index rose by 5 points to close at 4,791 points. The financial sector index recorded an increase of 22 points. The services sector index rose by 17 points, while the industrial sector index declined by 36 points, and the Sharia index lost 5 points. The trading value declined last week to 17 million Omani riyals compared to about 19.8 million Omani riyals in the previous week. The market value of listed securities also declined at the end of last week to 24 billion and 130 million Omani riyals, recording weekly losses of 29 million Omani riyals. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. The Sultanate of Oman and Germany signs a memorandum of understanding for an integrated supply chain for green hydrogen and ammonia and review latest updates in energy solutions. The Sultanate of Oman expresses its strong condemnation of the armed terrorist attack that took place in the Crocus City Hall near the Russian capital, Moscow, and resulted in dozens of deaths and injuries. And the UN Security Council votes today on a new draft resolution following the failed US-sponsored ceasefire resolution. With that, we come to the end of tonight's bulletin from all of us here at the newsroom and the studios. It's good night and Ramadan Mubarak.